Okay, this video is going to talk about writing expressions. And we're going to talk about basically two major topics. We talk about writing expressions in algebra. We're basically trying to make a connection between the real world and verbal phrases. Things like we have on the bottom here, like 8 more than a number x, or 7 less than twice a number k, talking about real world sort of statements and trying to connect them to how to write things in math. And in that case, we also want to talk about part B here, the finding unit rates. How can we relate numbers to the real world with real measurements and making conversions? So the first thing let's talk about is down at the bottom here. What about translating verbal phrases into algebraic expressions? Basically, to do math, we have to speak math. So what we want to do is take the statement like 8 more than a number x and find a way to write it as an algebraic expression, right? Using numbers and letters. Well, we already have our two things. We've got 8 and we've got an x. The question is, what are we representing by the words saying more than? Well, if we're 2 more than something, we're basically adding 2 onto it. If we're 5 more than something, if I have $10, but I have 5 more dollars than that, I'm basically adding my 5 and my 10. So 8 more than a number x is basically saying, let's take 8 and let's add on that number x. So our algebraic statement would be 8 plus x, matching up with that verbal statement, 8 more than a number x. Let's go to part B, 7 less than twice a number k. Well, now we've got a 7 and we've got a k. And if we want to be less than twice a number k, well, the first thing I want to think is I don't just have 8 and x. I've got 7, and I essentially have, I think, what I would call 2k. To be twice a number is to be 2 times as much. And if I want to be 7 less than that statement, well, let's start with that statement then. We have 2k. And again, if more than means add, I would think that less than would mean subtract. So our algebraic statement, it has a variable in it, would be 2k minus 7. And that sounds like a pretty good statement to me. Down at the bottom here, let's read our way through and see if we can't spot things that might trip us up. Again, more than meant addition, less than meant subtraction. Let's see what other kind of phrases we might find that might help us out. The quotient, so first thing I'm thinking is, what is a quotient? Well, when you add two numbers, you're adding, you're finding the sum. When you're subtracting, you're finding the difference. If you multiply, you're finding the product. If you find the quotient, remember that we're dividing. So the quotient of, we're going to divide a couple of things, of t to the second power. So that sounds like one statement there, t to the second power. So I'm thinking t squared here, t to the second power, and 12. So again, I've got a t squared, and I want to find the quotient of that. Now I could just say division. I'm going to use a division bar, kind of making a fraction, and 12, which leads me to believe that 12 is going to go on the bottom. If they're going to write it in that order, I would believe t squared is being divided by 12. Again, that's how we take a verbal phrase. Think about the major parts, whether they say quotient or product, or again, they could say sum, right? If we're talking about addition, or difference. If we're talking about subtraction. Well, there's a lot of different verbal phrases we need to understand when we're talking about algebra.